Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... This weekend, as I move forward with the extensive TBR that I constructed for myself, not only am I featuring a book that my good friend Tammy recommended, but I have Connie returning as my special guest. Because in this episode, we're reviewing Anne Rice's continuation into the world of the Talamasca and the Mayfair witches with Lasher. Now, before I get started, I would like to give everyone a heads up that this is a sequel to Anne Rice's epic novel known as The Witching Hour, which Connie and I reviewed last year. So if you haven't read that book, then this video will be full of spoilers, and I suggest that you read The Witching Hour before you proceed. Other than that, as many of you know, in The Witching Hour, Rowan and Michael resided in a mansion that was located on First Street in New Orleans, where in reality, that was the home where Rice lived with her husband Stan and their son Christopher. But with Lasher, Rice introduces another side of the Mayfair family tree who resides in a dilapidated old house on Amelia Street. And much like the First Street house, this one also exists in our reality, and it was Rice's second former home. However, if you go looking for the house, you'll notice that it is actually located on St. Charles Avenue. And much like how I visited the First Street house for the Witching Hour, Carrie and I returned to New Orleans to visit the house where Mona lived with her parents and Ancient Evelyn. Alright, y'all, this is one of the houses that the late Anne Rice lived in, and if you would like to visit it, it is located at 3711 St. Charles Avenue in New Orleans, Louisiana. This house was built by a German architect in 1881, and it was used as a boarding house. And upon Anne Rice purchasing the location, she had started renovations while she wrote Lasher. And this, of course, is where Mona's side of the family lived, which at the time of Lasher taking place, it was, of course, Ancient Evelyn, Mona's parents, and Mona, who all lived in this mansion of a house. And granted, the house in the book was described as being dilapidated and run down, so it still boggles my mind at how a location like this could be so run down and it'd still be considered like the poor side of the family, because Mona was considered to be the poor side of the family. So, yeah, if you ever get a chance to visit New Orleans, definitely visit the First Street house and visit this house on St. Charles Avenue. Well, now that everyone has seen the St. Charles house, also known as the house on Amelia Street, it's now time that we welcome Connie back to see what's been new in her world.
Hey everyone! I am so excited to be back and ready to hash out all things Lasher. I hope everyone had a terrific holiday season and Happy Mardi Gras! But yeah, every day's been pretty good with me. You know, it's been the usual work, home, being. I did just get a new dog named Bella, and it's been pretty interesting navigating her and the cats, but it's been turning out pretty well, and that's what's been going on with me.
That and your beads.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before you decide to try for something bigger, we would just like to thank all of the people who buddy read this with us, which this includes our good online friend Hanny, Carrie, and our good friend Tammy, which of course we had a great time discussing this book with you. And if any of you are watching, we hope you enjoy this review. But without further ado, let's head down to New Orleans and crank up Julian's Victrola, because it's now time to discuss Lasher. Lasher by Anne Rice takes place just a few months after Rowan's abduction. And even though Lasher has kept her on a tight leash, there have been small clues pop up here and there regarding her whereabouts, which throughout their travels, he has taken her to the Glen of Dunlaith where her great ancestor Suzanne had called him into existence. During their visit, as they try to piece together the mystery of his existence and his past, they come to the ruins of what used to be a grand cathedral that the Protestants had burnt down in the 1500s. And nearby is a chapel that has recently been uncovered where it houses the sarcophagus of an unknown saint.
While there, the powers of the glint affect Lasher, which this eventually allows him to impregnate Rowan after she had suffered two miscarriages from his previous attempts. Then, after returning to the States, Lasher keeps Rowan as prisoner in an empty high-rise office building located in Houston, Texas, where she is to birth their daughter, Emilith. Yet, his plans for Emilith aren't what normal fathers have in mind, because after Rowan gives birth, they are to return to Dunlaith, and together they will create a species known as a Tautos, which is expected to quickly increase in number through incest and rapid procreation.
Meanwhile, during Rowan being kept as a prisoner, the focus shifts to Michael, who not only has fallen into a depression due to losing his wife, but he has also lost his psychic ability. Also, against better judgment, he has sparked a love affair with young Mona Mayfair, which early on it's explained that she's a descendant of the Mayfair family tree that resides in the old dilapidated mansion on Amelia Street. From here, it's revealed that her bloodline of Mayfairs had broken away from the family in the 1800s after Julian murdered his father, Augustine. But more importantly, it's explained that due to incest, Mona has more Mayfair blood than just about anyone in the whole family.
Once gaining that insight, a backstory is provided by Mona's great grandmother known as Ancient Evelyn, and it reveals she is an oracle who speaks prophecies through poems, in particular, one of which regards what will become of Lasher. Aside from her, the ghost of Julian makes himself known to Michael in the first street house, and by doing so, he provides insight into his history with Lasher and how music can be used to disorient him, similar to a snake charmer charming a snake. Yet, as Michael begins to learn more about this family ghost, Lasher has begun to sexually assault other Mayfair women so that they can potentially bear more children for him to breed.
As time ticks closer to Rowan giving birth to Emilith, she knows she must escape her prison, because if Lasher gets his hands on Emilith, following her birth, there's no end to the bloodshed that will follow, as his goal is to produce a superior species to end the human race. Now, if Rowan could only get home to Michael, they could possibly stop what Lasher has planned. Lasher was published in September of 1993, just 1 month shy from it being 3 years after the publication of The Witching Hour. For 3 weeks, it stayed ranked as number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list, and after it fell from that spot, it spent 17 weeks in total on that same list. Unfortunately, Lasher did receive mixed reviews, and among them, Kirkus Reviews noted that Lasher shows Rice at her best and hackiest. In a 1993 interview, Rice stated that after separating herself from the Catholic Church due to losing her faith in their morals, she had eventually come around to feeling more optimistic that there was something more to the afterlife, and there was some great meaning to life. At this time, she had been reading religious history and had become more open-minded. Rice explained, upon writing of the Mayfair witches, she had fallen in love with the supernatural novel, and supernatural fiction allowed authors to write the best books possible. Also, she explained that when she wrote supernatural fiction, she could only write about what she knew and felt about life. And when she wrote a book like The Witching Hour or Lasher, she could only write of what she cared about. She expressed, these books talk about the struggle of people in a world where there is no revelation, and it speaks of the struggle of people to be good in spite of finding themselves to be bad. They speak about people banding together to overcome isolation, and the Mayfair family was wonderful to work with on those subjects. And she had ended The Witching Hour with what she felt was her best ending to date. Yet readers begged for a sequel, and it took her a while to see what that sequel would be. Upon the death of her daughter Michelle, this began Rice's search for the immortal and her writing career. And in 93, 20 years after her daughter's death, Rice suspected that her daughter went into the light when she originally believed there was nothing. Rice also said, "I want to be loved and not forgotten. I want to be immortal."
Fun facts! Why are you just giving it to me?
Because, Connie, we're simply trying to get through this without you flashing your box.
Well, here are some things you may not know that's relevant to the Book of Lasher.
In The Witch's Companion by Catherine Ramsland, Anne Rice revealed that she made up Dunlaith as she wanted a purely fictional spot in the Highlands, and this name sounded real to her. However, Glamis Castle, which is mentioned in Lasher's backstory, is a real place, and it is a Scottish castle that dates back to the 14th century. It became property of the Earls of Strathmore and Kinghorn in 1372 when King Robert II granted them land. It is considered the most haunted castle in Scotland, and it served as the setting for Shakespeare's Macbeth. Among its haunts, there is Beardy Crawford, who is rumored to play cards with the devil in a secret chamber. Aside from him, there is the ghost of Janet Douglas, and her spirit is believed to walk the halls. And there is rumor of a weeping woman who has no tongue or hands. Also, there is tale of one of its many rooms acting as a prison for a vampire-like monster. A few times throughout Lasher, Jack of the Green is mentioned, which Jack is a pagan fertility deity that's seen as a horned man surrounded by foliage. He was believed to be the spirit of nature and was associated with the little people. In the Highlands, people believed he was thought to be an incarnation of God prior to Jesus. Picts are another subject that come into play. Scottish legend suggests that the Picts were shaggy, long-haired men who lived in places that were hard to access in the northern and eastern Highlands. The word Pict means the painted ones, because they painted or tattooed their bodies with blue ink. It is believed that they were the earliest Celts to exist, and they were the first people to reside there during the prehistoric Bronze Age. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoiler segment, which, if you haven't read this book before, we're about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would like to click away, all you have to do is scroll down to the comment section, and you'll see that we have a pinned comment at the top with a timestamp in it. Once you click that timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this, so...
Ready, set, go!
Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, we're going to talk about a few moments that we will never forget. First up is Gifford's death. Now, leading up to this, Michael had thrown a Mardi Gras bash at the First Street house, and to avoid Mardi Gras altogether, Gifford Mayfair went to her beach house in Florida. Well, as the hour draws near to Ash Wednesday, it's noted that she had read the Mayfair case files, and while she's contemplating everything that surrounds Lasher and her family, her husband Ryan calls to explain everyone is fine and she should return home because a doctor who Rowan had spoken to after her abduction is on his way to New Orleans, and they're going to have a conference regarding what they should do. As they speak more about Rowan, Gifford warns Ryan that this isn't over. In response, he explains that he's coming to get her tomorrow, and they end their call. After that, Gifford decides to walk about the beach, and in doing so, midnight passes. But as she stands on the boardwalk, she looks back to her house to see a stranger inside, warming his feet on the hearth. Which, instead of running off, she confronts the intruder to find out it's actually Lasher. Upon their confrontation, he proceeds to sexually assault her with the intent that she bear his child. Following his attack, Gifford wakes up on the shore with contractions, as she has quickly reached her third trimester within just a few hours. And while she miscarriages and hemorrhages, Lasher explains that he wanted it to live and he didn't want to hurt her. Then, as Gifford lays dying, Lasher leaves her behind as she thinks of all of her obligations. Even though Gifford didn't have a huge role in this series, I had encountered her enough in The Witching Hour to know that I liked her. And while she falls into the trope of a character who should know to run away rather than to investigate, I had no clue what was going to happen next. Although I knew whatever was going to happen wasn't going to be good for her. Then, when Lasher's assault took place, me having insight into Gifford's mindset felt so brutally real. And once everything was over, I realized I had been holding my breath because everything was so damned grim and hopeless as she died alone. Also, adding another layer to this devastation, similar to Christmas Day being blasphemed by Lasher's birth, Rice goes a step further and manages to blaspheme the intent of Ash Wednesday with sexual assault. And to be honest, I feel like this act is symbolically important to the plot, as not only is Ash Wednesday a day of fasting and abstinence, but it marks the 40 days and 40 nights of the Lenten season, where penance is to be given until the day of resurrection. Yet, instead of honoring this holy season with abstinence, Gifford's death marks the beginning of Lasher's rampage, where he sexually assaults multiple women with the hopes that one of them will produce more Taltos.
Another outstanding moment is when Roman finally escapes from Lasher. But before this goes down, Lasher made it perfectly clear that after Emily's birth, he planned to mate with her. Also, during this time, the Talamasca took Aaron off the Mayfair case and handed it over to the elders. Michael had spoke with Julian's ghost, where he learned more about Lasher, and Lasher left Roman tied to the bed while he went out trying to reproduce with more Mayfair women. Then, upon Lasher returning to Roman's bedside, he remains adamant that she will love him again, and there is no need for her to ever want to leave. And while he claims she will be his queen, she tries to make his heart and brain explode, but unfortunately, she's too weak. Now, even though previously Rowan had wanted to escape multiple times, she was afraid of what Lasher would do if she did. But one particular evening, when Lasher comes to feed her, he cuts her free after Emily telepathically tells him to be kind to her. Which, upon him doing so, Rowan goes to the bathroom, and since she is near death and has nothing to lose, she takes the porcelain bag off the toilet. Then, when Lasher rushes in after her, she beats him in the head with the toilet slab and hauls ass. When Lasher's beatdown happened, I loved it, and it had me cheering from all over the place. Like, we got Rowan, who's been through hell and back, and she finally says, "I'm sick of this shit," and she musters up all the strength she can and beats the crap out of him. And let me tell you, when she smacked that ass with the toilet lid, I said, "I know that's right," and sipped my tea. After the hell Lasher put Rowan and everyone else through, he deserved every bruise, headache, every drop of blood, and whatever else he got. I'm just glad Rowan renewed her I'm a Badass subscription and got the hell out of there. No one deserves to go through that situation.
Next up is the scene where Lasher is forced to breed, which, leading up to this, we gain Lasher's backstory, where it's revealed Anne Boleyn birthed him on Christmas. And since she wanted to be rid of him, his father, who was the son of a laird, took him home and tried to convince everyone that Lasher was the reincarnation of Saint Ashlar. Nonetheless, the laird and those present remained adamant that Lasher is a Taltos and he should be thrown into the fire. But after Lasher is taken to a church where he kisses a statue of Christ during his infancy, the priest leads him to St. Ashlar's sarcophagus, which predicted Ashlar would return again to drive out the demons of the glen and lead them into the light. So, as Lasher is expected to imitate a saint, He's sent to Italy to become a priest, where he will eventually return to Dunleith. And over the next 20 years, he dedicated his life to Christ and felt like he belonged. Yet, despite mourning, he slept with 4 women, which resulted in their death due to pregnancy. Then, one day, a member of the Talamasca approached him, who explained that only a witch or dwarfed monster could bear his child. And he was sent away from Dunleith so its villagers wouldn't destroy him, as the sight and smell of him could regress them back to their cruel and pagan ways. Also, he explains if Lasher returns to the glen, he would be an animal of sacrifice. Yet, instead of going with him, Lasher returns to the monks, where he's approached by his brother, who convinces him to return to Dunleith, as the Protestants plan to attack them on Christmas if they hold a midnight mass, which, because of this threat, they need him to help them fight, as he claims Lasher is a saint sent by God. From there, they return to their father's castle on Christmas Eve. While here, his sister Emilith confronts him and tries to convince him that he is a Taltos and all of the monsters and witches of the land want him as their sacrifice. Nonetheless, Lasher wants to prove that by good deeds he has God inside him. So he goes to the church, where once again his sister and the Talamasca member try to convince him to leave. And she reveals that before the Romans and the Picts came to this land, the Taltos lived on an island, which, at first, the Romans sought to breed with the Taltos, as they could father sons who grew into manhood within just a few hours. By doing this, the Romans could use those sons for power. But when they discovered they couldn't breed with the Taltos, they decided to eradicate them. However, the breed survived in the highlands, and when Christianity came to the country, Ashlar, who was the leader of the Taltos, converted his religion, and he declared all of his kind should die, as they had no souls. Furthermore, she explains the purpose of the Taltos is to make a race of giants who will by sheer numbers drive other mortals from the earth. Yet Lasher remains in disbelief, and as the bell tolls for midnight, he goes about his plans, where the villagers lift him up and celebrate. And while they cheer that they will fight and win, music plays joyously as they parade him to his father's castle. Then suddenly the music turns pagan, and the Protestants enter their hall with a dwarfish hag. While entranced by the music, Lasher has sex with her, and although he wants to stop, he can't. Then, upon her giving birth, her offspring grows into an adult who proceeds to have sex with her while he drinks her breast milk. And as the crowd cheers to make Taltos until the sun comes up, they bring in another hag, where they force Lasher to rape her. Upon doing this, eventually a female Taltos is born. Then the firstborn Taltos is taken and thrown onto the Christmas fire as a sacrifice to the pagan gods. Meanwhile, Lasher screams for this to stop in the name of God, but they keep going. Y'all, this scene was so brutal, and it was so heartbreaking to see how Lasher had been lured into a trap where he was used for no other purpose than to reproduce, after he was so passionate about dedicating his life to the good. Also, it was so very pitiful to see him helpless and just standing aside and pleading for God to make it stop, when we knew it wasn't going to stop in any way that would benefit him. But personally, what took this over the top and made me feel absolutely repulsed was the rapid reproduction. Like, as soon as a baby was born, it would grow within minutes, rape its mother so she could reproduce and give them more Taltos. And by how this was described, it made me feel absolutely filthy. Also, because of how Rice conducted this scene, I felt like I was right there in the castle with Lasher, just watching in complete horror. And when this was all over, all I wanted to do was just take a bath in bleach.
And last is Emily's death. So leading up to this, Emily was born. Rowan was found and was laid out in what could potentially be her deathbed. We had discovered what the Tatos are capable of, and the Talamasca wants to take Lasher with them to keep him safe. Which this causes Michael to realize that this whole time the Talamasca wanted to bring a male and female Talos together. Then, despite their pleading otherwise, Michael attacks Slasher and chases him up to the third floor bedroom. From here, they get in a fist fight where Julian reminds Michael of the hammer. In turn, Michael bludgeons Slasher with the claw and multiple times, which eventually leads to Lasher falling out the same window that Anta fell out from decades ago. So after Michael buries Lasher and everyone who died that night, everyone clears out and things die down. However, this is when he hears a cry from Rowan's room, and upon investigating, he finds Rowan nursing from Emily's breast to regain her strength. Then all of a sudden, Rowan pulls back and screams for Michael to shoot Emily. And while Michael says he can't, Rowan grabs a nearby gun and shoots Emily in the face 3 times. Which, even though Rowan is sobbing for Emily, she continues to breastfeed on her dead body to continue regaining her strength. Y'all, I was reading this with my mouth dropped open because I honestly didn't see Emily going out like that at all. Poor Michael is going to need therapy for the rest of his life. And a part of me was like, Emily didn't deserve that. She didn't hurt anybody. But then I was like, but what if you knew you were going to birth Hitler? But while I hated for it to happen and I hurt for Rowan while she had to make that choice, I nearly sobbed for her while she sat there and cried, my baby girl. Because it had earlier been established that Rowan would never be able to carry again. It was just devastating. And I should have known something like this would happen, especially since the first book ended on the note that it did. But no, it happened again.
We would like to take this opportunity to bitch. Hit it, Picky.
I would like to take a moment today to bitch about Michael. And this came as a surprise to me because I've liked Michael since he was a rootable character. But his behavior with Mona warranted a bitch fest. So we got Mona here who's trying to play footsie with the entire family at 13. Well, although Michael is heartbroken and recovering from his ordeal, Mona decides Michael is to be her next conquest. Well, one fateful night, Mona creeps out over to First Street, and after everyone leaves from Michael's Fat Tuesday bash, Mona begs to stay tonight and starts her plan to seduce Michael. Then, after her bath, she starts hearing this music and goes out to investigate. And eventually, she finds Michael in the parlor where they bang like rabbits. But after being busted by the maid, you'd think that would be the end of their little rendezvous. But nope, the bull does it again on another fateful day. Michael! Really? I know you're heartbroken, confused, but that child is 13 years old. Get a damn hold of yourself. I mean, I liked you, but your ass deserves to get found out. You're the damned adult and you knew better. If you felt the need to cheat, do it with someone your own age. Or better yet, just grab a bottle of Jergens and a tissue.
I would like to take this opportunity to bitch about Lasher's sorry-ass father. Alright, now, I know the dipshit Dada Dunleith isn't the only sack of gutter trash to blame for what happened, but had his father actually taken some initiative and left his son be in Italy, or even had him go to the Talamasca, crap could have potentially been different. But no. The son of a bitch called Lasher back when shit started to go down, knowing good and damned well he was going to be used to pop out more children than the damn Duggars. And in the long run, this Dunleith jackass was going to do exactly what the Romans attempted to do so they could win a religious war to get the queen they wanted on the throne. Which this totally says a whole hell of a lot about the lengths someone will go to maintain their political and religious morals. Lasher is an epic follow-up to The Witching Hour, and because of how Rice continues immediately from where she left off, it's honestly like the first book never ended.
And while this work continues with the same characters that Rice already established, she presents a few new characters and she elaborates on side characters that she had previously introduced.
Aside from that, Lasher provided some pretty cool symbolism, especially with St. Michael and the Lenten season. And among the many themes this work presented, we noticed this book focused on poverty versus privilege, consent, and Christianity converting paganism.
Character-wise, Rice provides us with another strong cast, And while some characters made choices that caused us to like them less, it was really cool to learn about the other side of the Mayfair family tree, especially when it came down to Mona and Ancient Evelyn.
Also, it was really cool to gain more of Julian's backstory and to see
Mhm.
how Evelyn was like an oracle and Julian her interpreter or scribe. And despite all of the horrific crap Lasher did, after gaining his backstory, I did feel sorry for him and wish things could have been different. But out of all of the new characters, I would have to say Ancient Evelyn was my favorite, because not only does the name itself have a nice ring to it in a mystical sense, but I really fell in love with her feistiness.
As far as my favorite character goes, while there were many I liked, I have to say my favorite is Mona. And the reason why I picked her is because she's smart, fierce, witty, and she's not afraid to go after what she wants. Yes, she might be questionable at times, but she's edgy with a big heart.
Symbolically, although this was previously mentioned in the witching hour, Lasher lays on the symbolism with St. Michael a little bit more, which St. Michael the Archangel is believed to have defeated Satan and cast him out of heaven. And the sword that Michael is depicted with represents a line that connects the 7 monasteries across Europe and the Holy Land. Which, by the way, the monasteries were former places of pagan worship, much like the Glen in Dunlaith. But back to St. Michael. Since St. Michael cast out Satan from heaven, the same can be said for Michael and his battle against Lasher. And I found it really interesting that while St.
Mhm.
Michael is depicted with a sword as his weapon of choice, Michael always grabs for his trusty hammer. So I
Mhm.
definitely saw a comparison there.
Another important symbol of this book is the Lenten season. Now, in the witching hour, Rice uses Christmas as an opportunity to bring forth Lasher's birth, which acts as a blasphemous spur considering the context of the book. And in Lasher, Rice does a similar act, but she ties it to the holy season of Lent, which is to be a time of abstinence and penance to honor the 40 days and 40 nights leading to Easter. But due to Lasher's rampage beginning on Ash Wednesday, again we see where his character perverts another religious holiday with his actions.
Theme wise, one of the minor subjects of this book is poverty versus privilege. And granted, this was focused on in The Witching Hour in regards to Michael's life prior to becoming an architect. But
Mhm.
in Lasher, a similar circumstance is seen with Yuri and Mona. For example, as a young boy, Yuri turned to prostitution to survive. And while Mona's family isn't as well off as Rowan's side, she has a roof over her head, a bed to lay in, food to eat, and a computer to document her family tree and history on. And while she doesn't have to turn to prostitution to survive, she willingly has sex with just about anyone she wants, whereas Yuri acted out of obligation.
Also, we would like to add since Yuri and Mona became an item, we see history has potentially repeated itself. For example, since Mona has the most Mayfair blood in her, this indicates she is likely a powerful Mayfair. Also, she has gained the interest of Yuri, who has been excommunicated from the Talamasca, which their relationship has the potential to be similar to what happened throughout the past, where Talamasca members became romantically or sexually intertwined with Mayfairs.
Aside from that, a bigger theme of this book is consent. And while most people are familiar with the physical brutality of sexual assault, not many people consider a person's thoughts as the act commences. Which, one of the strongest examples of this is seen when Lasher assaults a Mayfair woman so she can birth him a Taltos. And rather than speak about what happens, we feel like this would be better summed up in the author's own words. Because under this particular circumstance, Rice describes the struggle as she had not consented, and then the horrible realization came to her that she had not fault. They would say she had not fault. Then another example is seen when Lasher is forced to breed, which, due to him being entranced by the music, his body acts against what his mind wishes.
So, due to how this is portrayed, we see sometimes the actions of the body do not reflect the thoughts of the mind. And sadly, in reality, this can be the circumstance in a lot of situations. In turn, this concept might cause outside sources to ask, why didn't the survivor put up more of a fight?
Then we have the subject of Christianity converting paganism, which is the case with practically any religious holiday, as Christianity took pagan practices and altered them out of hopes that more pagans would convert.
In this book, we have Ashlar, the king of the Taltos, who converted to Christianity and advocated that his people be burned to death because he claimed they had no souls, which, as an opportunity to influence more pagans to convert, the characters in this book made Ashlar a saint, although he was never canonized.
Although this book focuses on a great deal of other subjects that are minor and major, we have already discussed some of those subjects in The Witching Hour. And if we were to deep dive into everything that this book presented, we would probably be here until midnight. But overall, Lasher didn't scare me like how The Witching Hour did, nor did it creep me out or gross me out. However, there were quite a few moments that were definitely disturbing, especially when it came down to making the Taltos.
The book didn't scare me, but I was definitely grossed out and disturbed at different points when it came down to Michael and Lasher.
Lasher by Anne Rice ups the ante on a disturbing level, and although we should rightfully hate Lasher for what he has done, this backstory provides insight into the reason why he was the way he was. However, since Julian pointed out Lasher is a liar, we are left to question if Lasher was truly the good individual that he claimed to be. So for that reason alone, this is a great book to discuss in a buddy read. Also, while I had read Lasher during my teenage years, I had forgotten a lot of it, which I don't think a lot of it stayed with me simply because my brain had yet to mature enough. But at the end of the day, if you can handle sexual assault and abuse towards women, this disturbing sequel is a book that I highly recommend during the Lenten season.
I highly recommend this book. It kept me engaged and on my toes the entire time. I did not expect it to play out the way it did, which was a real treat. It's a great buddy read with friends. Overall, I felt engaged with the characters. The plot was original, and kudos to Rice for creating her own type of creature with the Taltos.
Well, thank you for returning. I had a great time reviewing this with you.
Me too. Thank you for having me back. It was a blast.
Of course, of course. And the next time we have you back is going to be when we review Taltos.
I can't wait.
Awesome, awesome. I had read that one before as well when I was a teenager, but a lot of it didn't stick. So I'm going into this one practically blind. All right. Well, thank you for being here, Connie.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
See y'all then.
Before I close out, I would just like to note, if you would like to hunt me down on social media or join my Patreon or the membership of this channel, all you have to do is go to the description section of this video and you'll see that I have links provided for all of those. Also, if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I do have more videos coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.